expansion was discussed both at a committee level and at the board, and ultimately the league office was tasked by our board with doing an in-depth analysis of all the issues around expansion, both economic and non-economic. Of course, the non-economic issues include dilution of talent, how it could potentially affect competition around the league if we were to expand, how you would stock those teams, all those related issues, the economic issues, as I've talked about before. As we knew would be the case in these discussions among the board, they're very complex because in how you would potentially value the opportunity has a lot to do with your projections on the future growth of the league. There is a significant step now in that we're now engaging in this in-depth analysis, something we weren't prepared to do before. But beyond that, as I said, it's really day one of that analysis. And so in terms of price, potential timing, too early to say. And again, I think that also assumes the outcome of this analysis. It is truly a complicated issue. And I think that it's not, I will say, despite, I think, some of the reports I've led, there was no sense in the room that people were taking sides. I think that, and there was no straw poll, there was no request that people indicate pro or con in terms of expansion. There was a consensus quickly formed that the league office should do the work and work with these particular committees and the board and present that analysis. We have to look at it as we're trying to think, what is the value of expansion? What does it mean to dilute the existing equity, and how additive is this potentially to the league by adding an additional team? The most difficult issue in terms of thinking about expansion is not looking at the current economics, it's trying to project out in terms of what the future should be. And you reminded me one other very critical factor, and I know I mentioned this after our last board meeting, is the one area where we're seeing an actual decline is in local/regional television. And as I've said before, I mean, it's not a gating issue necessarily in terms of expansion, but it would be something, I think we would be malpracticing if we didn't figure out how local and regional television is going to work before expanding. The notion that we'd hand over a team, into a city we're not currently operating, and we'd say, well, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to, distribute your games to your local fans, doesn't make any sense. We have not committed to expanding in the past. I think, yes, we have internally been looking at, I think, some of the obvious data that we had in front of us, but I think the next step is looking at specific markets, understanding what the opportunities in those markets are, understanding the facilities that are available to us to play in, understanding the level of interest from local businesses, understanding the overall appetite, in those markets that are expressing interest to us. I wish, standing here as the commissioner, I had lots of teams to dispense to many different markets who are interested in NBA basketball. I just think we also have this greater obligation to expand, if we do so in a very deliberate fashion, in a way that makes sense holistically for the league.